Hey everybody, it's Roger Thorpe here, president of Thorpe Benefits. I'm joined by David Howe today from Bright Breaks. Hey David, how are you?
Hey Roger, doing well, thank you.
Good to have you. We're going to have a quick conversation. I have some quick sort of lightning questions for you. So, first of all, the audience should know who you are in terms of the context of our conversation. So, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm David, as Roger mentioned. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Bright Breaks. We are a workplace wellness product based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and serve customers across North America.
Okay, good. All right. So you know something about the wellness world these
A little
days.
bit, yeah.
Good. We've had some good chats over time, and I just want to narrow down some really good insights that I think our audience would enjoy. So tell me first of all, like why do people need to take breaks? Like why is that important? How would you answer that first?
Yeah, so great question. So we at Bright Breaks have built kind of a platform to help employees take breaks. So of course, we didn't come up with that out of thin air. We've kind of looked at the
Mhm.
research, and one of the big pieces of research actually came from Microsoft around breaks. So what Microsoft did was they basically determined that your brain works differently when you take breaks. And
Right?
they found out that insight by measuring two groups of employees. And they hooked up these EEG caps to measure their brain activity during this experiment. So the first group was employees that had four meetings throughout the day, but they took a break between each meeting. And the second group had those same four meetings, but they were all back-to-back meetings, and they were able to again
Right.
measure the activity in the brain when taking these meetings and having these breaks. And there were two main takeaways from the study. The first was they found that breaks actually reduced stress for employees. So they found that these back-to-back meetings, as we all do, of course, in our busy jobs, were a big source of accumulation of stress in the brain. And it was actually the anticipation of these back-to-back meetings that caused a lot of that stress.
Ah,
So they found
okay.
that these short breaks in between meetings allowed the brain to reset and never experience that stress buildup from the anticipation of the next meeting coming. And then the second insight, again measured through these caps that they put on to measure brain activity, found that breaks actually promote performance. So get a little bit technical, but these back-to-back meetings resulted in negative levels of what is called frontal alpha symmetry. So basically, it's a
Mhm.
state connected to lower levels of engagement. And they found that the group that took the short breaks in between meetings had higher levels of this, which means they actually performed better during their workday when taking short breaks. So we thought that was pretty interesting. And the breaks were only 10 minutes long. So it doesn't take much, but taking a 10-minute break between meetings both reduces your stress and improves your performance.
It makes total sense. I mean, I can think of the way I've run some of my days where I finish and I realize I didn't stop and I'm exhausted. And I don't think we
Yeah.
need to give so much to our day and have nothing left for the rest of our day, our family, and the rest of our lives. So regimenting that is so key. And obviously, your platform helps find a way to get that in. Um, a little bit of a diversion here, but the concept that you've created is shorter versus longer interactions with your platform, right? So why is that easier than, or why does that work for your users versus another way to go?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of our own on top of the research, and some of the research, we can just relate. We know back-to-back meetings are bad, and
Right.
it's all these things. But we actually did some research where we tested a variety of break lengths. So our content early on ranged from as short as 3 minutes all the way to 60 minutes in length. And what we found was, after testing all of this content, it was actually the 7-minute breaks that were kind of the sweet spot for employees to take. So we found that with the 3-minute breaks, it was almost too little. You got just started it and it was over. It wasn't enough to kind of fully reset and kind of take an actual break. And the 45 or 30 or 60-minute content for an employee was just too stressful. It's Tuesday, it's noon, you've got a lot on your plate. To do a 60-minute yoga class is too much of an ask. So what we found was that the 7-minute content compared to all the other content lengths was 62% more attended by our user base. So it was by far the most attended type of break. And those users who took the 7-minute breaks, they took them more consistently. They were twice as much engaged on a weekly basis relative to the folks that were taking anywhere from the short of three or even the 15, 30, 45, or 60-minute breaks. So we
Yeah.
found that the 7-minute breaks, there's kind of a magic, sound to it, 7 minutes, but it was the most
Mhm.
attended. And our benefit is that we integrate with the calendar. So we actually slot that in directly to where you find fit. And then 7 minutes seems to be the perfect time for a break.
Love it. I love that there's science behind it, but it makes total sense that, if I ever try to build a habit, starting small, but there is this optimal amount of time that makes sense. If your system has figured that out, and then that's great. So last question for you is, all of this being done in a more of a remote environment, obviously, how has that changed things for you? What have you seen in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously been this kind of, you know, large shift in the way that we work as employees, pre-COVID and post-COVID. And remote work was always, some companies offered some flexibility, but it wasn't core to many companies. And that's changed. So, some data from LinkedIn over the last couple years is there was this peak, at peak COVID, everyone kind of went remote, right? And then it kind of came back down. And remote job postings have actually shrunk to 13% of all job postings. So companies are still working remote, but fully remote is about 13% of job postings. What's interesting though is employees want remote work. They want to have that flexibility. And those 13% of job postings actually are responsible for 52% of the applications. So it's clear that people want remote work. They're applying for those companies that offer that flexibility. Buffer did a survey. They found that 98% of employees, across North America want some form of remote, whether that is
Mhm.
at least a hybrid or fully remote. Right now, it seems like there's some studies out that about 16% of companies around the world are fully remote. 62% of companies offer at least some flexibility, so whether that's fully remote or hybrid.
Mhm.
Um, One company, Yelp, which we probably know, they shifted to fully remote in 2022, and they saw a 200% increase in applications for their jobs for these remote postings. So again, clear that people want it. And a lot
Yeah.
of people say work from home is dead, right? Because it's shrunk, COVID kind of had the peak and then it shrunk back down. But if we look at the actual data, pre-COVID, it was 5% roughly of employees and companies that worked remote. Now it's about 25%. So there's about 5x growth from pre-COVID to where we are today, and there was that big spike in the middle.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm really curious to see over the next few years as a lot of these leases come up where companies have space that they're renting out. So they kind of have a fiscal responsibility to keep people coming in the office.
That's
One
right.
last stat is, downtown San Francisco, they're kind of having a relatively big vacancy crisis. So 31% of all the space available, office space available in San Francisco is now available for lease. So this is a huge
Mhm.
number. It's about 18 million square feet. And so to put that into context, that's about enough space for 92,000 employees. So again, over the next couple of years, I'm curious to see when those leases come up, do companies renew, and then do they actually transition to more of a fully remote, working environment when they don't have to pay that huge lease every month?
Yeah, and I think you're right. You can't ignore this trend that's moving, right? There's been a lot of really good material out there in terms of watching what's worked, what hasn't. Have we sort of learned anything yet? So if the trend is moving that way, again, it does make interaction and employee engagement or connection with people that much more important. But certainly the people who are remote have to manage that energy through the day, which makes obviously breaks so much more important. So thank you for sharing that. That sort of accentuates this whole situation. So
Yeah.
thanks very much, David. That was great. I'm happy that you were able to share some good thoughts with the audience today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
good to see you.